record also. All right. We are
Oh, I have to,
live. I'm
I
here
have to,
with, what's that?
I have to consent.
Oh, please consent.
There, yeah,
Okay.
there we go. There we go.
That's awkward if you didn't consent after we set all this up. But I'm here with Mike
Yeah.
Walsh. Hey, Mike.
Hello, Jennifer.
So you are the president of EBI Canada, which is a real estate company there in Canada. But the unique thing about your company is that you're a buyer agent only company, correct?
Right, correct.
Which is really interesting because last year it was episode 62 of Real Estate Fight Club on November 30th. We got into a big discussion about should buyers pay their buyer agent commission? Like, should they pay it themselves? So
Right.
when we met on LinkedIn, I thought, wow, you'd be the perfect person. I don't know if we're going to fight or agree, but let's see. So what do you think about this topic?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a pretty straightforward topic. If you're, um, there's no reason I can think of for that not to be the case, other than it's not the case.
Right.
But
So like, why is it, because you've been in real estate for how long?
about 10 years.
Okay. So
Yeah.
why do you think that it's not the case? Or what do you think would be the downside of changing the policy?
Well, I think the policy came about like a long time ago, right?
Mhm.
It's with the creation of the MLS. And so, the time that it should have been changed, in my estimation, was what, 30 years ago when buyer representation actually became a thing, right?
Right, because for people who didn't know, it was really seller representation for a long time. I mean,
Yeah,
we'd have to ask Saul Klein when that switched, but I believe it was sometime in the 80s. Is that what you're
I think
thinking?
it was 92 or
90s?
93.
Okay, it was something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
80s
And
and
you did
90s.
it in your country, and then we picked up on it right away. Like we just follow everything you do, right? So we do,
You're
right?
the nicer version of us, I think.
So yeah, that would have been the time, right? Because when the industry was acknowledging and changing their what focus, I guess you'd say, to say, all right, buyers deserve representation,
Yeah.
right?
And I
That would
think
have
we
been
agree on that, right? And that's why you have your brokerage. What
yes, that's exactly right, exactly right. Right. That's why I have my brokerage because as a traditional realtor, which I was for 2 years, I mean,
Mhm.
traditional realtor, I was an agent at a large brokerage, traditional brokerage that represented both buyers and sellers. Um, so as an agent at that brokerage, I could not represent a buyer when they wanted to purchase a property that was listed at my brokerage because the listing agreement is with the brokerage. The buyer rep agreement is with the brokerage. It's
Right,
not with the agent. It's not with me. Right.
right.
It just happens that now. So that's what drove me to start my own brokerage because I thought, well, I mean, it didn't make any sense to me at all that I would have a client who I consider to be my client, right? Not my brokerage's client, my
Right.
client. That's how I looked at it, right? Although
Mhm.
that was not legally accurate, right?
Right. It's really a dual agency situation.
Well, it's not even dual, it's single, right? The contract for representation is with the brokerage.
Right.
That part is very clear,
Right.
right? And the people who are carrying out the representation are either an employee of the brokerage or it's an independent contractor to the brokerage.
Right.
Either way, it doesn't matter. The contract for representation is with the brokerage. If things go awry, who gets sued? The
The
brokerage.
brokerage.
That's where
But
the
if they have
contract
the
comes.
listing and the buyer, it is a dual, yes?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yes, yeah, absolutely, right.
Yeah.
So if the brokerage is purporting to represent both parties,
Yep.
then neither party gets represented in my estimation, right? Because the contracts for representation are at least here, they're pretty clear.
Yeah.
That if the brokerage is working for both parties, then neither agent can give counsel on the price or terms and conditions in the
Right.
offer.
Yeah,
And
we've
that's
talked about that on the podcast too. Like, can you
yeah,
really be a dual agent? And
yeah.
I think you and I would probably fight on that, but that's okay. We're not talking about that today.
Well, it is.
Here, what do you
Yeah.
think would be the potential positives and the potential negatives if the if it changed that the buyers truly had to pay the or buyer agent commission? Like,
Right.
I mean, I know they do now, but like if it was, well, I guess that's what the in America, at least in the States, the Department of Justice is making
Mhm.
it like, well, now it will be shown on our MLSs that we will have like what the
Right.
buyer agent commission is.
Mhm. Mhm. It'll be shown, and that's a step towards transparency.
Yeah.
Um, it it won't surprise me if the DOJ comes out and says no more. Right? Listing agents cannot offer compensation to buying agents. Right?
So what would happen, do you think?
Um, well, I don't know how it'll play out. I think that the plus will be that any consumer, be it be a seller or a buyer, will finally know that they're hiring an agent, that somebody to represent their financial interests throughout the entirety of the transaction. Because right now, if it turns into one of these dual agency things, then the
Mhm.
dual agency is not agency. It's just that's just a funny way to describe, you know, um, to
But
describe
doesn't it that
non-agent.
also require that the agent representing the buyer will now have to explain, I guess, I think what would be helpful is if
Mhm.
you could explain, like, tell us what your process is for, I assume you do a consultation with the buyer.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Oh, right.
I explain why my brokerage is set up the way it is.
Okay.
Right? How does this benefit you, Mr. Buyer?
Mhm.
And the way it benefits a buyer is that if the buyer wants to purchase a property that is on the MLS,
Mhm.
then every property on the MLS, I will be able to act as their agent. I will be
Mhm.
able to give them advice on the asking price. Is it overpriced? By how much? I will be able to give them advice on conditions to put into the offers that would favor them over the seller
Mhm.
for any property on the MLS. Okay. So the option is choose me or choose to work with a buying agent at a traditional brokerage. And to my way of thinking, traditional, like an agent at a traditional brokerage is fully capable of doing exactly the same thing that I do
Mhm.
on a one-off situation. Like I'm not smarter than they are, right? Um, but they are legally prohibited from giving that advice on properties that are listed at their brokerage. So if their buyer wants that type of advice, then they can only get it on properties that are listed at other brokerages.
I gotcha.
Yeah,
But I
and
think
this,
like at
yeah,
least here in I think it's some the stats are like only about 15% of well, maybe not. Maybe that's just like dual agency and not just, I don't know. I wonder how many properties are actually
mhm,
sold where
mhm.
they represent where the brokerage represents the buyer and the seller. Do you know the stats?
You know what? I mean, certainly it will be market specific. There's
Yeah,
no
yeah,
question,
for
right?
sure, for sure.
And I can tell you in my market, which is Oakville, which is a suburb of Toronto, where Oakville's sort of home to the securities brokers, lawyers, that type of demographic. So it's a very well-to-do community. And it is here, there are about 4, I would say, dominant brokerages.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and so your chances are
Higher
25%, right?
pretend. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I mean, that's a reasonably high probability. And then, I don't know, perhaps in your market, if there's 10, 15, 20 brokerages that share reasonably equally, then in my estimation, it becomes a bit of a non-issue, right?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, sure, you might run into a situation where you want to buy one of the houses from
Right.
your agent's brokerage.
Yeah, but you might not. So,
But
I
there's
mean,
a
the
better,
chances of,
yeah, there's a higher chance that you won't.
right,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So then what would you say to those people when they're trying to decide, like, should they have their own, like, buyer representation? And we could just talk about it in general. It doesn't, not
Mhm,
like
mhm.
a specific brokerage that does buyer representation, but just in
Right.
general.
Well, in general, I think a buyer, it gets into what do we mean by
Yeah. What does it
representation,
mean?
right?
Right.
And people in the industry, your country, my country, Canada, uh, we play a little fast, not a little, a lot fast and loose with the word represent, right?
Right.
So, a legal definition would infer that there are sort of contrarian or adversarial interests at play.
Right.
Certainly, like a real estate purchase falls into that category, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the seller wants the highest price, the buyer wants the lowest. Right away, you've got adversarial
Right.
interests. So how in the world can the same company commit to representing the interests of parties that are adversarial in nature? I mean, it's just like,
I imagine it's because it is on paper that it's the same company. In reality, they're different agents.
yes, they are different
But I
agents.
see your point, like from I mean, it makes sense. What are the pushbacks that you get from people that are potential customers? Because
Mhm.
a lot of times I know that customers think like, oh well, if I call the listing agent, then I'll
Yeah.
get a better price. Or like, what are some of the other things that you hear?
Well, certainly, if I had this just happened to someone who I was not a client, but someone who I know about and closely related to the situation, where the buyer went straight to the listing agent
Hmm.
at an open house, right? Um, was told by I posted about this on LinkedIn a week or so ago. Was told by the listing agent that if they would work directly with the listing agent, there would be no buying agent to pay.
Oh,
That's true.
okay.
That's true. There is no other agent. They didn't say that the commission would go down. They said there'd be no buying agent to pay.
Okay.
The buyer was left inferring that, oh, well, commissions will be cut in half,
Reduce.
right?
Yeah.
Two agents goes to one agent, full commission goes to half commission. That's a pretty,
It's a reasonable
reasonable.
assumption.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a reasonable assumption to make, right? Yeah, no,
Not
that's not
true.
the case. No, well, no, not
Maybe,
even
maybe
close.
not. Likely not
Well,
true.
it's not, because like a buyer cannot affect the contract between the seller and the listing agent. That contract said the seller will pay the listing agent 5% to get this thing sold.
Okay.
It went on to say it will allow the listing agent, and this is standard up here, right? So this is not This is not this particular contract. This is pretty standard. It goes on to say that the buyer or the seller authorizes the listing agent to offer at his choice, right, to share that commission with an agent for the buyer,
Mhm,
right?
mhm, mhm.
So okay, that's fine, right? Doesn't say that they have to,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Doesn't say that if there's no other
It's gonna
agent,
be
it's going to be
different.
cut in half,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't
See,
say
and
that.
yeah, and a lot of our contracts um here there is like if the seller is off, if the seller and listing broker agree to like a variable rate, it does
Yeah.
need to be disclosed here. Um but I am curious
Mhm.
if the seller and the listing broker agree to pay the buyer agent a specific commission
Yeah.
and you have an agreement with
Mhm.
your buyer where that
Mhm.
specific commission
Mhm.
that you charge is higher than what the offering is,
Right.
what do you do?
Then by the letter of my contract, right, with my buyer, they owe me the difference.
Yeah,
Right? They owe me the difference, right?
right.
Yeah. Then it's up to me
To
whether
collect.
I waive it, right?
Yeah, right,
I typically don't, right?
right,
I typically don't. It would be, it would be situation dependent. But
right.
but as a rule, no,
Do you
right?
think that as transparency continues and the buyers do you think that when the buyer sees the commission that the seller is offering to the buyer's agent, that they will then
Mhm.
think that it is negotiable for them,
I hope so.
for the buyer?
I hope so.
Okay.
I hope they come to that conclusion. I hope that's where the industry goes, right? That with this added element of transparency, buyers go, oh, I knew you were getting paid something,
Mhm.
right? I didn't
Mhm.
know how much,
Mhm.
right?
Well, except that they knew your charge.
Yeah, in my situation,
You mean
yes,
in
yes, I'm talking
general.
about the
Yes.
industry at large,
Okay.
right?
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Yeah, the industry at large, then because it's not displayed anywhere, or wasn't,
Right.
right?
And
And I
most
was just
agents I don't think do a they don't do a consultation and have a buyer contract, which you really should have a buyer contract. I mean, that's,
yes,
I think, where we're headed. I agree with you on that. And the buyer contract will state the charge.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny that buyers buyers are sort of up in arms about various issues, right? Um, well, then sign a buyer rep agreement.
Right.
Like this is simple, right? This
But
is
I
not
think the
rocket
pushback
science.
though from agents, or there's a lot of people that are saying like, as we head this direction, one,
Mhm.
that there will be much less buyer agent representation. And they have a question about how the buyer, if we do go towards a model where the buyer is paying their own representation
Mhm.
and the seller, it's not being offered by the seller and listing broker,
Mhm.
how would they pay for it? Like, is it out of pocket? Do then lending practices have to change? Like, what
Yeah.
happens?
Um, well, I mean, the lending practices have to change. I mean, I've heard that argument that it can be rolled into a mortgage. Well, that's fine. What about people who are paying cash? There is no
Yeah,
mortgage. They won't,
right.
right?
Now their
So
cost,
yeah.
yeah, the cost. I wonder then would prices go down, right? Because I mean, they are paying for it, right, as the buyer, because the seller is going to
Mhm.
accept an offer based also on their cost associated with selling the property, right?
That gets into a really interesting philosophical discussion
Yeah.
about, are sellers, to what degree does the net, is it net or gross to a seller? And yeah,
Yeah,
we could
that is
spend,
an interesting. I wonder, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, we're going to find out. I think we're going to find out. I think
Yeah,
that's the,
it's
I think that's where we're going, right?
yeah,
I really do. I think that's where we're going, that the listing agents will simply represent, the seller. And if a buyer wants representation, fine, they can
So
pay
we
for it.
may be going back to the old days when it was a buyer
Yeah.
beware situation.
Oh, wouldn't surprise me in the least. In the
History
least,
does
it would.
repeat itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's like fashion. Yeah, so we very much could be going there. And if we go there, then the mega brokerages, right, that wants to and push in-house deals, that's where you're going,
Right.
right?
Right.
100% that's where you're going, right?
Yeah.
As an industry, and it'll be
Which
those
would
that want.
negate somewhat of a clear, we have a clear cooperation rule where there's like you're required to cooperate with other brokerages, but that would kind of push people, it could potentially push people in the direction of not cooperating.
This whole thing about cooperation is going to go the way of the dodo bird. It's just like, you know, like it makes no sense to me, right? If you're representing your client, you're taking their side,
Yeah.
not cooperating. What is this cooperating? What the heck does that
I
mean,
think
right?
what they mean by it is that
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it'll be made available. We will give you the information even if you're from a different brokerage, I think is what
sure.
it means.
Yeah. Okay, and that's really um, going down a slippery slope,
I agree.
because then you handpick what information you give,
Right. Which is that in the best interest of your client?
because you're smart, you're a real estate agent, and you're 10 times smarter at real estate than the client is, who's only done this twice in their whole life,
Right.
right?
Right.
So as an agent how to steer a client. You
Hmm.
know exactly how to do it, right? So you handpick the information that will lead to the decision that you want them to make, right?
That is not good at all. That
That
is
is
not
not good.
good.
That is not good.
I don't know.
Jennifer,
I
that's
agree.
not
I think
good.
there's a slippery slope here. I think there's a
Yeah, it's
balance
a,
between transparency
yeah.
and I don't think that just because you're 100% transparent with something that that equals the same as who is receiving the information. It does not equal understanding.
No.
So there's a line there, you know. The more transparent you are, if they're not understanding, then what happens?
Well, yes. I mean, I enjoy reading some of Rob Hahn's posts, right? You're familiar with Rob?
Mm-mm.
Oh, and he's all over LinkedIn, and he's a consultant to the real estate brokerage community, right?
Okay,
So
I'll
he
check
he
him out.
consults with real estate brokerages, and he's very irreverent, and that's why I like him, right? So he shoots from the hip. He's fun, but his perspective on where things are going, the industry is directly in line with mine. It's the value of a real estate agent is not in producing data,
Hmm.
right? Because you know the and it's not as an introduction service, house to buyer, buyer to house, right? That's the internet can do that. The internet
Okay.
does that, right?
Right.
Most people I know own a computer and they know how to use it.
Right.
So they're able to search houses themselves.
Yeah.
Most of my clients, like the vast majority,
Right.
vast majority, they
Right.
find the property that they want to um, find out more about and sort of set a negotiating strategy for. They find that property themselves,
Yeah. Right.
typically, right?
Right.
So the value of a real estate agent is not the provision of data, it's the interpretation of data.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's advice, it's
Hmm.
judgment and advice.
It's consultants. I mean, I
Yes,
think that we're going more
yes,
towards consultancy as well. I don't
yes.
know. I'd have to read what he says on like if we agree on like how we're going to get there or what that could
Mhm,
look like. But
mhm.
I think, yeah, it is a consultant. So that takes the people that are just opening doors and the people that are just
Right.
like, I call them Pop Tarts. They just
That's good. I like that. You're a pop
they just
tart.
like Pop Tart up and do whatever.
Yeah.
That those level of agents
Mhm.
will they'll still be around, but they will be, in my mind, employees of some of the larger companies. And then you'll have this next level of these where that's where most of us live, but we'll be pushed up to be
Hmm.
consultants. We will have to know more. We have to
Hmm.
be able, like you said, to interpret the data, not just be able to pull it like they can.
Yeah, yeah. Have to be able to interpret it, have to be able to advise
Mhm.
your client um, as to what your opinion is.
But it's
What's
a
my,
different skill set than what they teach you in order to get a license.
well, that's such an
It's a
interesting,
whole different can of worms, isn't it,
it,
Mike?
it's a different can of worms. And also, here's something else to just think about, right?
Mhm.
When young, fresh-faced or old, fresh-faced people are in real estate school, right? They're taught to take their client's side, right? They're taught that's what they're supposed to do. They're not taught how to do it, but this
Right.
is what you're going to do.
Right.
When you become a real estate agent, you are going to be representing your client, right?
Right.
What does that mean? You're going to be trying to get them a better price, a lower price, better conditions,
Whatever it is
whatever,
that they want, their
whatever.
goal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That's what you're going to do. Okay, good. So you come out, you go, yeah, that's great, right? And then you join a brokerage, and the activities of your colleagues dictate that you can't do that in the situation where you're representing a buyer. They want to look at one of the houses listed by one of your colleagues.
Mhm.
You're not doing what you thought you'd be doing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so why can't we licensing laws be changed so that the consumer can contract directly with Jennifer Mertland? Why is that not possible, right? Instead of
You're
whoever your
talking
brokerage is.
about getting rid of brokerages completely.
Getting rid of the, um, yeah, well, no, because you would become your own brokerage unless we want to rewrite all the law, which
Right.
we could do, right?
Yeah.
But then you are your own brokerage, right? Okay, so they still contract with the legal entity that is you, and you're an employee of your own brokerage, just like I am now. Um, and that's the way it's going to be, right? So, I lost my train of
I
thought.
mean,
Where
you
were we?
just run into problems. So there's been times when we have, like, if we've represented a buyer and they're looking
Mhm.
for something and there's nothing available. And
Okay.
so one of the values that we provide is, well, we'll go find it. And
Okay.
so we do circle prospecting, we door knock, and we find it.
Yep. Right.
Now what?
Right. And you know what? And yes, that is a valuable service, I think. If you find it,
But that
your
seller
buyer.
doesn't go quote unquote unrepresented.
Well, I mean,
They
they
can,
should, they should,
but they
right?
don't.
If you're being upfront with them, you're saying, I'm representing this buyer,
Mhm.
right? This buyer has an interest in your house. Um, if everything is above board, the recommendation to the seller should be, if you want an agent, go get one. If you want your lawyer to represent you, get your lawyer to represent you.
Well, I guess
I
it
am
depends on
representing
what
the
state.
buyer.
So in our state, we are allowed to, in both the states I work in, we are
Yeah.
allowed
Mhm.
to do dual agency.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, and here too, right? It's just that dual agency is doesn't mean anything. It's not agency.
it's
It's
the
just a
agent
funny
of the,
thing.
you become the agent of the transaction.
Oh, that's a good one. Oh my God. Are we gonna go there?
No,
Are
we
we
need
gonna
to
go
part
there?
ways.
Are we gonna go that the commission comes from the transaction?
This is gonna like, I feel like we're gonna go off the rails here. Let's come back to the point. You
Okay.
think that, or you believe that we are
Mhm.
headed towards where buyers will end up signing contracts with specific buyer agents
Yeah.
and end up also paying for the commission somehow in a different capacity than they do now.
Yeah.
Is that your thought?
Yeah, yes. I don't think that listing agents are going to be allowed to offer commission to buying agents, and I don't think buying agents are going to be allowed to accept it,
Interesting. It'll
right?
be interesting to see what
And then
happens.
then you go to true agency.
Yeah.
right? The
Right.
listing agent is truly an agent of the seller. The
Mm-hmm.
buying agent is truly an agent of the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And the value of both services goes up immeasurably.
Right. Interesting.
So
Yeah.
maybe you're going to see even though there's not going to be this split, right? So even though 5% doesn't just change to 2.5, you might see total commissions go up. It wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
surprise me at all,
Yeah.
because totally in totality, the service provided is far more valuable to the consumer than it was before.
Yeah. That'll be interesting.
Bona
Well,
fide. Yeah.
Mike, I don't know if people stuck with us this long, but it is interesting to kind of figure out what are the pros and cons and what could happen. And because
Mhm.
part of that is like, let's be prepared for
Yep.
anything. And it helps us all. Like, what is the value that you provide your client? It helps you streamline, it
Right.
helps you, you know, be a better agent, I think.
I think so too. I do, right? It's, furthering the understanding, and hopefully consumers will be better educated by the DOJ decisions, by the class action lawsuit
Hmm.
decisions that
Hmm.
are going on. Canadian consumers will be better educated once US consumers are. Because right now we're doing like there's nothing, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. I guess
Right?
we're gonna find out. But if
I guess
people,
we are.
if the agents listening to this do maybe have a referral for you or they have a question, what is the
Mhm.
best way to get a hold of you?
They can either phone me,
Hmm.
right? 289-834-4440, right? Or they can email me, which is michael.walsh@exclusivelybuyers.ca, or they can just go to the website and ebicanada.ca, and all the contact information is there.
Perfect. Easy enough.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I really appreciate you being on. Thank you.
I appreciate you inviting me. Invite me back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Next time we'll go down other rabbit holes for sure.
Invite Saul to join us.
Yeah, sounds great.
He
All right.
is.
Well, thank you.
Okay, Jennifer.
Bye.
Cheers.